cup of hot tea slipped from the trembling hands of the Nigerian flight attendant and spilled directly across the chest of Korea's most feared mafia boss. His guards reached for their guns. Instantly, the cabin froze. Even the pilots stopped breathing. But the man in the black leather chair did not shout. Kang Min-Jae slowly lowered his eyes to the steaming tea spreading across his white shirt, then pressed his fingers against the old wound hidden beneath it. A wound that had refused to heal for 5 years. His fiancée stood near the cabin door in stunned silence. She knew this man better than anyone. Min-Jae did not forgive mistakes. Men disappeared for less. The Nigerian woman dropped to her knees immediately. "I'm sorry." Her voice cracked badly. Her hands trembled so violently. Then their eyes met. And something shifted. Not romance, not desire, recognition. Like two exhausted people had suddenly seen each other clearly inside a world that had never once stopped to look at them. The guards waited for Min-Jae to speak. Instead, leave her alone. Silence spread across the cabin like a slow flood. His fiancée felt her stomach tighten because she had never once heard softness in his voice before. Never. 3 hours later, Min-Jae sat inside a private hospital while his doctor stared at the wound on his chest in visible disbelief. Infection stopped spreading. Min-Jae said nothing. Dead tissue is reacting. Still silence. The doctor looked up slowly. "What touched your wound today?" Min-Jae remembered the tea instantly. But strangely, he remembered her eyes more. By the time his security team returned to the airport, the Nigerian woman had already disappeared into Seoul's rainy night. And somewhere else inside that same city, a woman quietly made a phone call. Find her. Rain hammered against the tiny apartment Adaeze, rented near the edge of Seoul. The room smelled of herbs and medicine. Bills covered the table beside her bed. Hospital debt, overdue rent, final notices. Adaeze ignored all of them while carefully boiling herbs inside a dented silver pot, her grandmother's recipe. The same tea she carried onto the private jet earlier that day. Steam filled the small room slowly. For one brief second, home did not feel so far away. Then her phone rang. Unknown number. "Miss Adaeze." "Yes, you are no longer employed by the airline." Her breathing stopped. "What?" "You violated conduct policy on board the private jet. Your contract has been terminated effective immediately." The call ended. Adaeze lowered the phone slowly, then laughed once, a quiet, broken laugh. No family, no savings, no job. Seoul suddenly felt much colder meanwhile. Inside a penthouse overlooking the city lights, Kang Min-Jae replayed the incident repeatedly inside his head. The tea, the apology, the fear in her eyes. Why could he not forget it? His fiancée watched him silently from across the dining table. Unusually distracted tonight, Min-Jae continued reading documents, but he had not turned a single page. "She looked terrified," he said quietly. The fiancé froze, not because of the words, because he noticed. Kang Min-Jae was a man people feared instinctively. Cold, unreachable, emotionally buried alive for years. Yet somehow, he remembered one frightened woman on a plane that unsettled her deeply 2 days later. She received Adaeze's background report. Foreign immigrant, minimal income, no family connections in Korea, living alone. The fiancé closed the file slowly, then noticed something unexpected. Adaeze regularly sent money back home, despite barely surviving herself. That irritated her even more, because kind people were difficult to hate completely. Elsewhere, Adaeze sat inside a convenience store counting coins beside instant noodles. A small Korean boy stood outside the glass window, dirty hoodie, thin frame, hungry eyes. Adaeze noticed him immediately, but pretended not to. 10 minutes later, he was still there, watching people eat, watching warmth through glass. Adaeze sighed quietly, then walked outside. Take it. Boy blinked. Get in trouble. I already lost my job, she replied softly. So it can't get much worse. He accepted the noodles carefully, like something sacred, then ran into the rain without looking back. Adaeze watched him disappear. She never noticed the black car parked silently across the street. Inside it sat Min-Jae's fiancé, watching, thinking, not angry yet, just deeply unsettled. 3 days later, Adaeze found work cleaning tables inside a late-night restaurant near the Han River. The pay was terrible. The customers were worse. But survival did not care about pride. One rainy evening, a drunk customer grabbed her wrist hard. Foreign girls should smile more. Adaeze tried pulling away. The man tightened his grip. Then another hand seized the customer from behind. Kang Min-Jae. The entire restaurant went silent instantly. Everyone recognized him. Fear moved through the room like cold air. Min-Jae released the man slowly. Get out. Customer ran without argument. Adaeze stared at Min-Jae in pure disbelief. What are you doing here? His answer came quietly. I wanted to ask about the tea. I searched for you. I missed you. Better. More believable. Adaeze relaxed slightly. It's just herbs. You healed something doctors couldn't. Her eyes dropped immediately. That wasn't intentional. Silence fell between them. Then Min-Jae noticed her coughing softly against her sleeve. Sick. I'm fine. You almost collapsed carrying plates. I said I'm fine. Sharpness surprised both of them. But Min-Jae caught something important in that moment. Pride. Even struggling to survive, she protected her dignity fiercely. That interested him far more than beauty ever could. Behind him, near the entrance, his fiancée watched in silence. And for the very first time, jealousy began mixing dangerously with fear. Because Min-Jae looked calm around Adaeze, present, human. Later that night, Adaeze walked home carrying leftover bread from the restaurant. Footsteps echoed behind her, then another set, then another. She slowed carefully. 3 men emerged from the darkness. One stepped forward. Adaeze's blood turned cold instantly. Her ex-boyfriend, the man she escaped in Nigeria. He looked ashamed, desperate. Adaeze, she backed away slowly. What are you doing here? He lowered his eyes. They paid me. Confusion crossed her face. Then he pulled a small bottle from his jacket. Adaeze's eyes found a black car parked silently across the street. A silhouette inside, a woman watching. Her heartbeat collapsed. She turned to run. But the liquid struck her face before she could move. Her scream tore through the empty street. The bottle shattered at her feet. Burning exploded across her skin. She collapsed into the rain, clutching her face, while the world dissolved into pain and screaming, and nothing else. Her ex-boyfriend staggered backward, horrified. I'm sorry. The black car drove away immediately, cold, controlled, unstoppable. And somewhere inside that moving car, a woman quietly realized she had crossed a line she could never uncross. If your heart already hurts for Adaeze, subscribe now. Because her darkest moment is only just beginning. Rainwater mixed with Adaeze's screams, while strangers gathered beneath the streetlights. Nobody touched her. Nobody moved. Fear always made crowds useless. Then an elderly woman rushed forward with trembling hands and pressed a wet cloth against Adaeze's face. Water. Bring water. Her voice cracked desperately into the rain. Adaeze clawed weakly at the pavement, while the burning pushed deeper beneath her skin. Everything blurred, the lights, the voices. The cold, wet ground beneath her fingers. Then darkness swallowed her completely. Hours later, Adaeze woke inside a hospital room she did not recognize. Bandages covered half her face. The mirror beside the bed had been removed. That frightened her more than the pain. A nurse entered quietly. You should rest. Adaeze touched the bandages slowly, then stopped breathing, even without seeing it. She already knew everything had changed. 3 days later, she disappeared from the hospital before sunrise. No goodbye, no report, nothing. When Kang Min-Jae finally arrived, after tracking her location through the airline records, her hospital bed was already cold and empty. What do you mean she left? The nurses avoided eye contact. One finally spoke softly. She refused all visitors. She said she didn't want anyone seeing her like this. Something tightened painfully inside Min-Jae's chest. Not the old wound, something far deeper meanwhile. Adaeze hid inside an abandoned storage building near the old market district. Damp walls, broken ceiling. No mirrors. She chose it specifically for that. The same little Korean boy found her accidentally while searching through trash for recyclable cans. At first, he froze completely when he saw the scar. Not disgust, pure shock. Adaeze slowly pulled the hood further across her face. Sorry, she whispered. The boy stared silently for several long seconds, then sat down beside her on the cold floor and offered her half a loaf of bread. Adaeze nearly broke apart completely. From that night onward, Ji-Hoon kept returning. He never asked questions, never stared too long, never pretended not to notice the scar either. That mattered enormously, because fake kindness hurt almost as deeply as cruelty. Days passed slowly. Adaeze stopped venturing outside during daylight. Children whispered when she passed. Adults shifted away instinctively. Customers moved to the far end of small stores. Mirrors became her enemies. Her confidence disappeared piece by piece, like pages torn from a book no one wanted to finish. But every single evening, Ji-Hoon appeared with something small, warm bread, a drink, stories about his day once. He even brought a tiny wildflower growing stubbornly through cracked concrete. For your room, he said shyly. Adaeze smiled for the first time in weeks. And across Seoul, Kang Min-Jae could not stop thinking about her. At first, he told himself, it was the wound, the healing, the mystery of the tea. That explanation felt safer. But late at night, he kept remembering smaller things instead. Her tired eyes, the way she protected her dignity fiercely, the way she gave food away while barely surviving herself. One evening, Min-Jae stood silently inside a crowded marketplace watching Adaeze from a careful distance. She was feeding stray dogs beneath an old bridge beside Ji-Hoon. Huge, scarred dogs, animals everyone else crossed the street to avoid. But the moment Adaeze crouched beside them, they became completely gentle. Ji-Hoon laughed quietly, while one enormous dog rolled onto its back beside her feet. And for the first time in years, Kang Min-Jae smiled. Not a cold smile, not a calculated one, a real one. That single moment terrified his fiancée more than anything that had come before it, because she had spent years desperately trying to reach warmth inside a man emotionally buried alive. And somehow Adaeze had done it accidentally, by simply being herself. That same night, the fiancé visited Adaeze's former hospital secretly. She walked through the burn ward in silence, while patients turned away behind curtains, then stopped outside Adaeze's empty room. For one brief second, guilt crossed her face, very brief, because even now, she still remembered Adaeze on her knees inside the jet, apologizing sincerely. Eyes full of fear, but not hatred. The girl had not looked manipulative, just kind. And that truth made everything the fiancé had done feel uglier, and uglier the longer she stood there, back at the penthouse. Min-Jae finally confronted her directly. You investigated her. His voice was perfectly calm, too calm. The fiancé set her wine glass down slowly. She appeared around the same time your condition changed. You followed her. I was protecting you. Min-Jae held her gaze for a long, uncomfortable moment, then asked the question she had been dreading. Did you hurt her? The fiancé's heartbeat stumbled violently. But years beside dangerous men had taught her how to lie without flinching. No. Min-Jae stared several seconds longer, then turned and walked away without another word. But doubt had already entered him quietly. And doubt inside Kang Min-Jae was always the beginning of something irreversible. Meanwhile, Adaeze found work inside a night laundry facility where steam filled the air heavily. Darkness helped, distance helped. People judged less when they could not see clearly. One freezing evening after work, Ji-Hoon grabbed her hand excitedly and dragged her toward a rooftop overlooking the Han River. I found something. Come. Adaeze followed reluctantly, then stopped completely. The entire rooftop was covered in tiny hanging lights powered by stolen batteries. Broken chairs surrounded a small portable stove, glowing warm in the darkness. Ji-Hoon spread his arms proudly. My secret place. Adaeze laughed softly for the first time in months. Real laughter. Ji-Hoon pointed across the glittering skyline. When I get rich, I'll buy a building bigger than all of those. Adaeze smiled faintly. And what will you put inside it? Food, he said instantly. For people who are hungry. Answer hit her somewhere she was not expecting, because hungry children usually dreamed about being fed, not about feeding others. They sat quietly beside the stove, while water boiled softly inside a small kettle. Ji-Hoon glanced at her carefully. You know, the scar isn't the first thing I see anymore. Adaeze looked away immediately. Emotion tightened dangerously in her throat. Before she could speak, footsteps echoed behind them. Both turned sharply. Kang Min-Jae stood near the rooftop entrance alone. No guards, no weapons, no expensive suit, just dark clothes and tired eyes that had clearly been searching for a long time. Ji-Hoon moved instantly and protectively closer to Adaeze. Min-Jae noticed, but respected it completely. "Not here to hurt her," he said quietly. Adaeze looked away. "You shouldn't be here." Min-Jae stepped forward slowly. "Went to the hospital. You shouldn't have." Silence settled heavily between them. Then Min-Jae's eyes found the kettle steaming beside her. "The tea." Adaeze nodded slightly. "My grandmother made it whenever someone was sick." Min-Jae sat carefully across from her. Nobody spoke for a long moment. The city glowed quietly far beneath them. Ji-Hoon eventually drifted to sleep beside the stove. And something entirely unexpected happened in the space between two exhausted people. Peace. No danger, no performance, no fear, just two broken people, breathing the same quiet air. Min-Jae finally broke the silence. "It hurt." Adaeze knew immediately he meant the scar. "Yes." He lowered his eyes briefly. "I'm sorry. You didn't do this. Someone close to me did." Adaeze's breathing slowed carefully because she had already suspected the truth for weeks. Min-Jae looked toward the sleeping boy. "He trusts you completely." "Trusts hungry people," she replied softly. That almost made Min-Jae smile again. Then Adaeze asked the question she could no longer keep buried. "Why do you keep looking for me?" Min-Jae answered honestly for the first time. "At first, because of the wound, the healing." Adaeze looked away. "And now?" she asked barely above a whisper. Min-Jae held her gaze steadily, long enough for her heartbeat to become dangerous, then answered with the quiet certainty of a man no longer interested in pretending. "Now, I think I just can't watch you disappear. If Adaeze deserves peace after everything she has survived, drop a comment for her below. Tell her she is not invisible, because something terrible is already moving toward her again." 3 nights later, Adaeze disappeared again. The rooftop lights Ji-Hoon had built with stolen batteries were smashed across the concrete floor. The small kettle still boiled softly beside an overturned chair. But Adaeze was gone. Ji-Hoon ran through the rain-soaked streets of Seoul, screaming her name, while water flooded the sidewalks around his feet. Nobody helped, nobody stopped, until he reached the only man powerful enough to tear the entire city apart searching for her, Kang Min-Jae. "She's gone." Min-Jae rose from his chair instantly. Ji-Hoon could barely breathe. Men took her, the dog men, the warehouse near the bridge. Something dark and irreversible entered Min-Jae's eyes immediately. Not rage, something far worse, fear. An hour later, black SUVs ripped through Seoul's midnight streets, while Min-Jae replayed every failure inside his head. He should have moved sooner. He should have trusted his instincts sooner. He should have protected her the moment he first understood what she was. And deep down, he already knew exactly who was responsible. Meanwhile, Adaeze woke inside complete darkness. Metal chains rattled somewhere nearby. Low growls moved through the walls. The smell reached her first dogs, large ones, many. Her breathing collapsed instantly. Then heels clicked slowly across the concrete floor outside the cage. The fiancé emerged from the shadows wearing black gloves and a face that had forgotten how to feel. You really are difficult to erase. Adaeze backed instinctively against the cold metal wall. What do you want from me? The fiancé crouched slowly outside the gate. Him to become who he used to be. Her voice cracked slightly despite herself. You don't understand what your kindness did to him. Adaeze stared in silence. For years, the fiancé whispered, that man felt nothing. Then suddenly he smiles. He sleeps. He notices people. He laughs at stray dogs like a person who still believes the world is worth something. Tears filled her eyes despite every effort to stop them. And none of it was because of me. The first time since that night in the rain, Adaeze did not see a monster standing before her. She saw a woman who had loved someone completely and slowly become invisible to him anyway. But pain did not excuse cruelty. Nothing ever would. The fiancé stood slowly. These dogs were starving once too. Funny how tenderness changes dangerous things. Then she reached down and unlocked the gate. The barking exploded through the darkness. Instantly, Adaeze squeezed her eyes shut, while chains rattled violently across the floor. One dog charged directly toward her, then stopped. Silence. A second dog approached carefully, sniffing. Then another. Warm fur pressed gently against her trembling hands. Soft whimpering filled the room. Adaeze slowly opened her eyes. The dogs were gathered around her peacefully, licking her fingers, recognizing her, remembering the woman who fed them beneath the bridge when nobody else cared whether they lived or died. Outside the den, one of the guards whispered with wide eyes, "She's the bridge girl." Then headlights exploded through the warehouse entrance. Gunshots thundered. Metal gates collapsed inward. Men shouted through smoke and chaos. And Kang Min-Jae stormed into the warehouse like a man who had left every careful, controlled part of himself behind at the door. Ji-Hoon ran breathlessly beside him. This way. This way. Min-Jae's face was terrifying, not cold, not composed, broken open. He reached the underground den and stopped completely. Adaeze sat surrounded by massive scarred dogs, resting around her like guardians who had chosen their queen long before tonight. Everything became still. Then Adaeze looked up at him, and her eyes filled instantly. Not because she had been rescued, because he came. Min-Jae entered the den slowly. The dogs growled once in warning, then moved aside quietly, as if they understood exactly who he was to her. He knelt directly in front of Adaeze. His trembling fingers reached toward the scarred side of her face. Adaeze flinched away automatically. Min-Jae's expression shattered. "Hide from me." Her tears finally fell without permission. "She ruined me." Min-Jae shook his head slowly. "No." His voice cracked for the very first time. "She failed too." Adaeze broke completely then. Months of fear, humiliation, loneliness, invisibility, all of it collapsing at once like a wall that had been crumbling quietly for far too long. Nearby, Ji-Hoon wiped his eyes roughly with his sleeve, then whispered the one line that finally destroyed both of them emotionally. "You both stopped looking lonely when you met each other." Adaeze covered her mouth instantly. Min-Jae lowered his head because the child was simply right. 3 months later, spring returned to Seoul. The infection inside Kang Min-Jae's chest had healed completely. Doctors called it impossible. Min-Jae called it Adaeze. One quiet evening, Ji-Hoon dragged Min-Jae up the stairs of a small rooftop tea shop above the city skyline. She's waiting. Adaeze stood beside a small table, while warm spring wind moved gently through her hair. The silver kettle rested nearby, steam curling softly into the night. The same tea, the same scent, the same woman whose trembling hands had accidentally changed everything. Only now, she no longer looked afraid of being seen. Min-Jae walked toward her slowly. No guards, she asked softly. No weapons either. That finally made her smile, a real one. And somehow, that felt more dangerous to him than anything he had ever survived. They sat across from each other while Seoul shimmered beneath the rooftop lights. Then Adaeze carefully poured tea into his cup. This time, her hands did not tremble, no fear, no chaos, no blood, just peace. Min-Jae stared at the rising steam quietly, then looked directly at her. You know what I remember most about that flight? Adaeze raised an eyebrow gently. Tea. He shook his head slowly. You apologized to me while you were terrified. Emotion tightened inside her chest immediately. Most people only ever saw a monster, he continued quietly. But you still chose kindness first. Adaeze looked down briefly, then finally whispered the question she had carried for months. Why me? Min-Jae answered without a single moment of hesitation. Because when the world spent years teaching you to become hard, he held her gaze with complete steadiness. You chose to stay gentle anyway. Tears filled Adaeze's eyes immediately, not sad ones, healing ones, the kind that only come after surviving something that was genuinely meant to destroy you. Min-Jae slowly reached across the table and gently held the same hand that once spilled tea across his dying wound. The same hand that fed scarred dogs beneath a bridge. The same hand that gave noodles to a hungry boy through rain. The same hand that kept choosing tenderness. After every single cruelty, the world pressed against it. And this time Adaeze held his hand back. If this story found you tonight, subscribe. Because somewhere in this world right now, someone gentle is still waiting to be seen before the darkness reaches them first.